I am excited to be here with you today to talk a little bit about COVID-19's potential impact on generations. And I'm glad to have Philip all the way from Oklahoma City listening in with us today. We will have a recording of this on our website, genY.com/free-webinars that you are welcome to share with any of your friends, family, listening, anything like that. I'm just excited to be here with you. So super excited to be talking about COVID. Okay, fair warning. I have a tendency to call it Covoid. I don't know why. It just sounds better in my head. So don't get irritated if I say it wrong. Okay, everybody calm down. All right, so let's talk a little bit about COVID-19 and how it potentially is going to impact generations. The first thing I want you to kind of get right now in your head, if you're looking for some reading, it is not light reading. Okay, it's great reading, and it's kind of scary reading, but it's called The Fourth Turning, an American Prophecy. It's what the cycles of history tell us about America's next rendezvous with destiny. And it was actually written in 1997. And what Strauss and Howe are historians. They're actually the originators of generational theory. So we use them a whole lot. But Fourth Turning shows you how through all civilized history, we have been on a cycle and we repeat over and over and over again. And so it's funny because I've had people that have said like, oh my God, did you know that you were about to be predicting COVID-19 when you mentioned it at our last meeting? And I was like, no, but I knew that something was coming because we're at in the timeline, we're in the right time for something to happen that would catalyze a change, a re-upping, if you will, on generations. And so it was time for the fourth turning. If you want to really dig in deep about this and kind of freak out because they were crazy accurate, then definitely I cannot suggest this strong enough. They also have it on audiobook. And for those of you that don't already have Amazon, you can get it for free on audiobook. So recommendation before we even get too deep down, read The Fourth Turning. It's crazy accurate. It'll help you understand a lot of this a whole lot better. So here's the bottom line, you guys. We have in the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe even 4 weeks, depending on where you're listening from, we've been going through the 5 stages of grief as it comes through America, right? So the first level we had was denial. Everything's fine. This is a problem they're dealing with in China. It's not going to get us. We're fine. Then as it starts to come across the borders, people start to freak out. They're angry. How dare people travel with this and that? And oh, how dare they shut down the schools? And oh no, what if they don't shut down the schools? So we go through a pretty, because we're Americans, we're pretty good at anger. We go through a pretty long period of anger. Then we go through this stage of bargaining. And it seems like we almost had a short bargaining. It was almost like, well, if this happens, then we'll do this. And if this happens, then we'll do this. Well, if we can get the numbers down by this date, then we won't have to close, blah, blah, blah. So there's bargaining that happened. And then we went through a serious depression. And some of us are still sitting in the land of depression right now, of major changes, major effects to small businesses, people not having jobs, people having friends and family who are sick. They're down deep. And then as we move through this, we will get to a period of acceptance. Some of you feel like you've turned the corner and you're already there right now. And some of you are like, it's somewhere in one of these other stages. And that's fine. But we have to understand that there's a cycle that people go through when major change happens. And it's very similar to the stages of grief that you would have if someone passed away. You are grieving the pattern of your current life. That has changed and you have no control over it. And so it is going to emotionally deal with you in a way that it maybe hasn't emotionally dealt with some other people. So go ahead and get to it. And this place of acceptance in your head that everyone you encounter is in some different stage is dealing with this in different ways. So everyone really wants to know, that talks to me about it right now, is what are we going to call this new micro generation? The ones that I've heard most frequently at this point are the coronials, Generation Zoom. For those of you that are taking like 5 million Zoom meetings a day, you'll get that, or Zoomers. And then the quarantines or the quarantinagers, we've seen that a whole lot. But there's a great quote over here from Malcolm Harris, and he says, generations are really only understood in retrospect. Some people have a financial interest in naming them as soon as possible. People who are trying to sell stuff. And that's true. That's 100% true. There's this sort of rush to sort of define what's going on, and anything that can be controlled, we want to control. But we don't know. We don't know what they're going to be called. We definitely know that they exist, and that this will be a defining moment for the generation. So for those of you that haven't listened to me, this particular concept, second, the different generations, for those of you that have lost that, but don't worry, we're getting there. Okay. The other big thing that, beyond going through the stages of grief, is we've seen that this great quote from Plato: necessity is the mother of invention. Things that people said we could never, ever, ever do, we are doing right now, right? Having worship ceremonies in, across from sitting from our home, being able to work from home. People who your boss told you for years that you could not work from home, and then now all of a sudden you can. It's amazing, right? So we're seeing that when you have no choice, you can do a whole lot of really interesting stuff. And that's where we are right now. There's going to be major changes, and we really only have two choices at this point in time. We can kick and fight and scream about the major choices that are changes that are happening, or we can get to a place of acceptance and begin going with the flow and brainstorming what's new. So for those of you that know anything about generations, or you've listened to me before, you know that there's this concept of generations usually fall into 20-year spans, and that you also have this idea of micro generations. Okay, so we've got different events that have happened in culture that make us do different divisions. And so we do the big clumps as traditionalists, baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, and Generation Alpha. And then you have micro generations. So the traditionalists are the oldest generation that we have right now. The silent are the second half of that generation. Boomers are the first half. Flower children, they're also called Generation Me, are the second half. Generation X, and then the Zennials, the Millennials, and Generation Z. Generation Z has pretty cleanly defined themselves as Gen Z at this point. And then we have Generation Alpha, and then we have, they were called Homelanders, but this is what we're going to call our Coronials, or our Zoomers, or our whatever. It's going to be these kids who are, 4, 5, 3, 2, 1, and brand new, who are going to have the major impact of their childhood on the coronavirus. So remember, when we look at generational norms, what we're looking at is what happened during your childhood and how does that affect the way that you see the world. So we're not going to spend tons of time on this because that's a whole nother presentation. But for those of you that don't know a lot about it, please go ahead and look on the list right now and figure out what you would call yourself based on your age. Remember that ages are always in fluctuation, and that there's always the possibility of outliers, right? That people age up based on their life experience. So figure out where you are, figure out where your partner is, figure out where your children are, where your boss is. The more that you can kind of know where everyone falls on this as we go along, the better off you're going to be. Okay. We're mostly going to actually speak today in the 20-year group. So the traditionalist, boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Alpha is the predominant way that we'll go through this. So when I was planning, it was sort of like, well, how do I really talk about this topic in really a pretty short period of time? Because it's much harder to be on a long call. And so I decided what I would do is ask to answer some questions that I've heard about each generation. Like when I hear people complaining and moaning and groaning, what are they talking about? What are they asking about? So let's start here with the big questions that I've heard about boomers and traditionalists. The first one is a why question. And that question that I hear very frequently is, why do so many traditionalists and baby boomers refuse to stay home when they are the highest risk at this point in time? If you are experiencing having a conversation with any boomers or traditionalists in your family that refuse to stay home, will you give me a thumbs up in your emoticon? Show me. Are any of you dealing with this? Anyone? Let's see. Yep. Why is it? I mean, like, why do we know? We've very publicly said that people that are 60 and above are the highest risk pattern. Why do we see, like, when I walk around my neighborhood, I don't know if any of the rest of you have noticed this. When I walk around my neighborhood, everyone who passes me in a car is over 60. It's crazy to me. And I like am yelling about it. And my husband's like, well, let's get down to the generational reason behind this. So here's the main reasons why we're seeing this. The first main reason why we are seeing that many traditionalists and boomers refuse to stay home is that the longer you've been alive, the longer you have become entrenched in your patterns and habits. Okay. And people who, as you age, you get into a very good cycle, a pattern of what is going to happen every single day. So let's say that you are a traditionalist and you normally are at home. Then you've got certain days where you go out and you grocery shop, certain days where you go out and get the mail from your P.O. box, certain days where you go and check on your grandchildren, right? You get into a pattern. If you are not at home, let's say you're working, you still are in a pattern. You get up, you wash your hair the same way, you get dressed the same way, you leave your house at the same time, right? So these patterns are making it really, really difficult to break because they become habits in their brains, okay? So that's one of the main reasons that I would suggest traditionalists and baby boomers are refusing to stay home. The second thing is that doing nothing in time of crisis is not in the cultural DNA of either of these groups of people. This quote of when the going gets tough, the tough get going, very much is something that people who are traditionalists and baby boomers ascribe to. This idea that things are crazy and out of control and I'm just supposed to stay home and act like nothing's happening is the antithesis of what they have done in every other American crisis in their youth. Okay. So think about World War II, immediately mobilized, Vietnam, protests, civil rights movements, all of these things. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. So this group of people, it's not in their cultural DNA to sit at home and do nothing. Okay. So this is one of the big things that I will tell you. You're going to continue to see this and you're going to continue to fight it. Another thing that I would say is the next question I always get is, okay, well, then why are they so mad that young people went out on spring break trips if they're still going around town? Has anybody heard anything like this? Have any of you talked to any baby boomers or traditionalists and they are just furious that other people are going out even though they're still going out? Give me a thumbs up if you've seen anything like that. Yeah. Uh-huh. Right. So why are people, if it's okay for them, then what's the problem? So the first thing that I will tell you is that this, as it is with many boomer issues, it's normally a respect issue. It feels disrespectful, honestly, for lack of a better term. Many older people feel like this is basically younger people saying, well, since it's not a big a threat to me, then we don't really care what happens to you. It's like well, I'm fine and I can party and I can have a good time because I haven't been told that I'm going to be sick. And so because of that, it feels like that younger people are saying, because it doesn't affect me or it has a lower risk of affecting me directly, that I shouldn't care about anyone else. For lack of a better term, it feels selfish. Okay. So this is one of the big issues that boomers are dealing with. When they go out, they don't see what they're doing as being selfish because they feel like they had no other choice, or it's a pattern that's entrenched in what they do. But when a young person goes out and does it and brings that back into the home, it feels more selfish to them. Whether that is true or not doesn't really matter, right? Because if you perceive something as true, it is to some degree true, right? So many older people are feeling like this is younger people thumbing their nose and saying, well, it doesn't affect me, so I don't care if it affects you. And of course, that's firing them up. The other thing is that boomers as a whole have been, and if you go and read The Fourth Turning, they'll tell you about the cycles of roles that we play in culture, and boomers were assigned a hero role, essentially. And so because of this, they developed a bit of a hero complex in that they think we protect the younger people, and now we can't. If we can't lead them, how will they know what to do? Okay, now think about this, you guys. Even in war, you're not taking your older people out of the game. Okay? They're making decisions. They might not be on the front lines, but they're still heavily, heavily involved in every single decision. Based on what we are experiencing now with the pandemic, we have removed many of those people from their role as leaders. Okay. And so they're freaking out in a completely, totally different way because they're not being listened to. They can't go in and save the day if we're ignoring them. I hope you're seeing a little bit of this, maybe even countering this with your friends and family. And then, of course, they're jealous. I mean, I would be jealous too. If you are under 60, you have a freedom of mobility that baby boomers and traditionalists just don't have. You just don't have it unless you've got some, lung issues, things like that. The media, whether the media is telling the truth or not, who knows? But the media has basically said, hey, if you're under this particular age room, you shouldn't go out, right? It would be rude to go out, but you have a much lower risk. And that feels like a bit of a shoestring for many baby boomers. And so what we're seeing is they're saying, well, nobody's going to tell me what to do. But if it keeps me alive, then I'm all about you telling them what to do. All right. So here's the thing. This is very common in independent cultures, collectivistic cultures, individualistic cultures. In independent and individualistic cultures, our nature is to have no problem with rules going out on other people as long as it doesn't affect us directly. And here's the thing, you guys, with COVID-19, it's affected every single person, every age group, every gender, every socioeconomic background. We are all impacted, right? And so there's this kind of feeling of try to control everything that you can control. And in independent cultures, that's rules. We love rules, right? So this is another one of the big reasons. Another question you might be dealing with boomers and traditionalists is, why are we having even more virtual meetings, videos, conference calls, and having to send more reports? Anybody out there dealing with this? Do you feel like you are doing more meetings, video conference calls, sending reports? Show me out here on your chat box. Do you feel like you're getting more? Let me see. Yeah, people are like, yeah, I feel like I'm on a video chat all the time. Right? Yeah, right. So, I love Cindy Brandon says not more, but I welcome them now. Let's talk about that too. Yeah, so we see that there's an increase in this happen. So what's the reason for this? The short reason is that it gives people a sense of control. Okay. So what you have to understand is that boomers and traditionalists were trained under the concept of management by walking around. And so this idea of you can find out who's working and who's not working based on being able to see them work. And that's why when I do my presentation about Gen Xers, and I always talk about how we are such fabulous fake workers because we're used to those boomer bosses and traditionalist bosses walking around to look and see if we are working or not. Well, now the problem is that everyone's in their home. It's very difficult for them to see if you're working or not. Right. And so because of that, the idea of having more virtual meetings, more conference calls, things like that, gives you a sense of knowing if your people are working or not. And maybe that's okay. And maybe that's not okay. But that's definitely one of the big catalysts of why you're seeing this increase. Okay. The other thing is that video chats, things like Zoom and Skype, are just techie enough to make them not feel irrelevant, right? It makes them feel relevant. They feel like, okay, look at me. I'm doing early adopter things. I'm using video chats and I'm figuring out how to make virtual backgrounds on my Zoom, and it's just enough. But in particular, Zoom and Skype are so user friendly that it's making it quite easy for people to be able to log on, right? So we're seeing that there is an interest that they're liking that. And people, in particular, baby boomers who are early adopters by their nature anyway, they're loving it, right? They're just jumping right in right now. 100% on there. And we're definitely seeing this happen. And then the other big thing you have to understand is why they want you to be on video. Video chats fill a social need. And boomers and traditionalists are more social than Gen X and millennials. It feels a social need. To be able to see your face makes people feel not as alone. And so we're going to see a continued increase in this. What my prediction is, and of course I'm making predictions at this point in time because who really knows, but my prediction is that you are going to see the amount of meetings decrease. over time. As employers begin to feel more and more confident about everyone being able to handle it, you are going to see that decrease. The obsessive need to check in with you all the time should begin to decrease as time goes on. So, how can we support the baby boomers right now? The first thing you can do to support them is to stay home if you can. Do your part for social distancing and let them know you are doing that, okay? So let other people in your life who are boomers and traditionalists know that you are staying home and that you care about their health also. The other thing I would tell you is now's not the time to argue about micromanagement. If you see people wanting more meetings, more video chats, more reports, now's not the time to have a big argument about, well, why don't you trust me and why don't you let me do whatever it is I need to do? Give people a good month and you're going to see this really, really calm down. But you have to understand this was an impossibility to baby boomers less than a month ago, guys. They never thought that even they could work from home like this. So you're going to see a little bit of this change along the way. Another big thing that I would suggest you do is offer some virtual trainings for any specific softwares or topics that you think could be helpful. Offer to be the trainer on that stuff. Do an extra Skype and train people how to use those particular softwares. And then the other big thing I would push is new schedules. So my new favorite phrase is you have to establish a new normal. There's a new normal that has to happen now. We've had a major disrupt. And we're sad about that, but there's a new normal. And what we can do is encourage each other to put a new schedule into place that doesn't look like an 8 to 5 sit in front of a desk. Okay. There are some flexibility to do more of the things that we love over the course of the day. And so finding ways to do that is going to be really important, and encouraging people to find new schedules is going to be a major game changer in how we react to the COVID-19 change. All right. So hopefully you learned a little bit more about boomers, that you will go about supporting them a little bit better. Let's move into the questions that I've heard about my Gen Xers. The first one I hear all the time is, why are Gen Xers so overwhelmed? I mean, isn't working from home what they wanted? Okay, here's what you have to understand. For no Gen Xer did their version of work at home include having children in the house. Okay, it just didn't, unless they have infants. Right? For most Gen Xers, it included school or daycare where they had time to quietly think and be by themselves. And at this point in time, they have zero quiet. Okay. The version that what we thought was going to happen wasn't this. Okay. So in our little dreamland, there is no thousands of children, puppies barking and barfing on the floor, laundry, dishes being thrown around. This isn't the work from home that they imagined, okay? So, sorry, somebody said testifying. That got me tickled. So that's what you need to understand. It's not that, well, Gen X got what they want and now they're mad about it. That's not what it is. This is not the version we thought was going to happen, okay? So that's the first thing that you need to understand, is that even though Gen Xers feel perfectly comfortable working from home, they weren't ever imagining it would include having all this stuff too. Okay. Another thing that we need to understand is that most Gen Xers have become really, really good at separating their work life from their home life. It's like they flip a switch, right? They do work, they have their friends at work, their schoolwork, they blah, blah, blah. They might work from home, but they don't mix those two worlds together, and they're blending now. Okay. And that is confusing to people because before they've had the two different worlds. And I would say boomers are encountering some level of this too, right? So realize that having this blended work is also throwing things off. And then the idea that, listen to me, hear me. The idea that Gen Xers can work a full-time job from home at 8 hours of sitting in front of their computer and getting tasks done and homeschool their children is, number one, insane, and number two, a scheduling nightmare. It's bonkers. You're asking them to do 2 full 8-hour jobs. This is gonna be really, really, really hard. So here's what I would tell you. Grace. Number one, if you are a Gen Xer, extend yourself some grace. Okay. Everybody is going through a weird change, and this just happens to be Gen Xer's weird change. Okay. It's possible we will find the new normal. It just probably isn't going to happen in 2 weeks. There's a little bit of a learning curve for every single person involved. So just stay with it. You can do it, okay? This is the big thing that you need to understand. What this has led to is a generation of people who feel like they're failing at everything, okay? In the past 2 weeks, I have heard more Gen Xers say, I am currently failing at work, family, bathing, brushing my teeth, changing the sheets, not yelling and screaming like a psychopath, right? What happens is there's a level of guilt because this particular generation is the generation of Pinterest moms who have been told that they can do anything and they can do anything. And if you just try hard enough and want it all, you can be super mom and you can do it all. And let me just go ahead and tell you, brother and sister, right there, you can't. You can't. You're going to have to, part of being a grown-up is figuring out what deserves the most attention at any given time. Same at work, right? When you have a new project that gets dropped on top of you, you have to decide which is going to be the most important thing to do at the time. And so you can't do everything all the time. And so what I would really suggest you do is sit down with your family, your friends, and design a schedule of what your daily schedule is going to look like. When are you going to have time apart to work on your things? When are you going to have time together? You have to find a new normal, and it's not going to be easy. Okay. But the good news is that we are going to figure it out with help from you. In particular, you baby boomers who were the first people to go into this generation of having two parents, both working and having to manage home. You guys can give some really, really good advice, right? Really, really advice along the way. Okay. All right. So stop feeling guilty all the time. Listen, I don't care what they're showing you on. If you get on Facebook and they're showing you that they are great, swell, and wonderful, and people are coloring and doing, you are only seeing the best of the best. Okay, so give yourself some grace right now, and hashtag learn adulting a little bit of time. So how can we support Gen Xers right now? Number one, first thing I would tell you is that before you call a meeting, figure out if it really needs to be a meeting at all. Oh, sweet Peter. Before you call a meeting, does it need to be a meeting? And do they really need to be on the call? Don't just add people to the call just because they're on your checklist and it's 100 times easier than pulling people off your checklist. Definitely. Don't take unnecessary time away from the household. So really, those of you that are having to call meetings, figure out, do you really need to have a meeting at all? Or is this just information dissemination? The other thing is be flexible in your meeting times. There is a great, if you've not heard of doodle.com, please check out doodle.com. And what Doodle does is it allow you to, each person that's on your little list can check the times that would be their best times to have a meeting, availability, all this. And then what it'll do is it'll show you the best ideal times for the majority of people. Okay. So definitely check out doodle.com. You will love it. And it will help you with your establishing your new normal. Hopefully, at least a little bit. And then the last thing I would tell you is, extend grace. There's going to be multiple distractions at any given time. Don't make anybody feel bad about a child wandering into a shot or a dog barking or, anything like that at this point in time. Everybody's adjusting, and most Gen Xers are the ones that are dealing with the most loud distractions, I would say. The most uncontrollable distractions, right? So don't worry. Time is coming. New normal is coming. But I would really suggest being proactive and finding your schedule for your family for the day. Okay? All right. So questions I've heard about millennials and Gen Zs at this point in time. One of the big questions I've heard is people saying, why are young people having trouble with technology? Aren't they supposed to be digital natives? Okay. Yes. But digital natives don't necessarily know anything about scanning things in or creating PDFs or setting up a printer in their home. They definitely don't have to fax anything, right? Pardon me. So just because you've got a new software going on and they're not just killing it right off the bat, don't be mad, okay? The other thing I would tell you is this. many of us are not clear on our expectations with people. We're not clear about, do we want them to be on the video? We just get mad that they're not on the video. Do we want them verbally participating? What do you want? This is an opportunity for you to set a new set of ground rules on how meetings are going to happen and what the expectation is going to be. Millennials thrive on clarity. The more clear you are on what your expectations are for them, the better off it's going to be. Be clear. Don't suppose people just quote unquote know. We've never done this before, you guys. We've never done this before. So don't just assume that everybody knows how you want them to act. All right. The other thing I would tell you is going on to how can we support millennials right now? The first thing I would really push is reassuring the millennials. Look, millennials are just as scared as anybody else right now. Nobody has any guidance on how to do a worldwide pandemic. If you had an employee that was already afraid of you, that was already afraid to ask any questions of you, it's 100 times more intense right now for them with virtual stuff. Okay. Because they don't want to just bomb you with 1,000 questions. And here's the thing. Millennials might be understanding that they are bombing people in a way that they didn't before. All right. But reassure them. It's all going to be fine. We're all going to figure it out. And Lucas brings up an excellent point here to the corner. Tech is developing at an explosive rate at the meeting. Yeah, it's going to be massive, massive changes. And many of these millennials are going to lead the way on those changes. But just realize youth has nothing to do with if you're freaked out right now. Everybody's freaked out. Okay. So this is important at this point in time to just be as kind and reassuring as you can be. The other thing I would be really careful of is, we already have a tendency to make millennials feel disposable. And that's part of why their bounce rate is so high. But for many of the older millennials, they went through the Great Recession anyway, and they waited 6, 7, 8 months to get a job. And they know that there's this sort of last one hired, first one fired, and it's freaking them out. And so the panic level might be significantly heavier, right? So again, make people feel like they are important and that they are needed, and that you are glad to have them as part of your team. Speak positivity as much as possible to your team at this point in time. Even if you have a bad message to deliver, speak as positive as you can right now, okay? And then the other big thing, look, this is the opportunity for those of you that do have true digital natives, that this is like breathing for them to be on Zoom, all right? Use their knowledge. This is a chance for you to let these young people be the SMEs. This is their chance, right? So make sure that you're giving them an opportunity. If they can teach a lesson, if they can teach a class, if they can record a video, if they can edit a video, if they can add something to a website, ask them, are you capable of doing this? If so, will you help us? This is a great opportunity for millennials to be able to take their moment to shine. Okay, simply because they've been running a PowerPoint since they were in 2nd grade. So the more that you can help push them to the forefront right now and give them an opportunity to lead in their unique way, the better you're going to be. All right, so let's talk real quick about this idea of the future of work. And I'm trying not to get tickled at the conversation over here in the chat room talking about rotary phones, house phones, flip phones, party lines. For some of us, we have set the Wayback Clock to way back at this point in time. So let's talk a little bit about the future of work to kind of wrap up this conversation. The big thing that I will tell you is this: if this goes on for months, I want you to go ahead and expect that most Gen Xers and millennials are going to take a stand about going back to 8 to 5. Okay, so let me just see, because I know we're busy over here in our chat. If you have the ability to continue to work from home, do you think it is going to increase your chances of staying at a company? Do you think the ability to continue to work from home is going to be one of those things that we now see as a benefit? Let me see. Absolutely. Yep. Not just the youngins. I'm telling you, I think what you'll see is in particular, and we talked about flower children, the second half of those baby boomers, they're going to be right there in that same boat. Yep. So here's what I think is so interesting. When I talk to people who have companies right now, they'll say things like this. Well, when we all come back, they're not going to come back. They're not going to come back, okay? You are going to have people, if they work for 3 months and they've not missed a beat, and you see that they are killing it in their work, and you look at those workers and you say, okay, everybody back into the office so we can continue to monitor you, they're going to say no. And they're going to go find companies that will allow them to do what we're doing right now. You cannot take away something as big as freedom, right? Give this and take it back away after people have successfully proven that they can do it. It would be like this. It would be like you setting a curfew for your child, okay? That child continuously meeting that curfew, never breaking the curfew, right? And then all of a sudden you decide to move the curfew back even earlier. What? They're showing you that they can meet the rules and do what you ask them to do. Why would you restrict their freedom? Okay. Already we're seeing, there's people over here talking about really interesting things. I mean, think about the hours you have gotten back on your commute. The hours you have gotten not having to get ready. I don't know about you, but I'm in my pajamas right now, saving money on gas, right? We are seeing, what you're going to see is exactly what Stuart is talking about here, is it's going to be people that have a lot of money in meetings, in buildings, that's going to be an issue. Okay. If you have, you can't break your lease, for example, right? You're going to see that's going to be drama. You're going to see a big change on this. So here's what I would suggest you do at this point in time. Start the conversation, especially those of you that are in human resources that are on this call right now. Begin the conversation with your upper management now. What's our plan going to be? What can we change? Can we potentially have a hybrid? So Michael Rogers is bringing in this great concept of what's called hybrid working, where you work some days in the office and some days, maybe you have meetings at certain times of the days and everybody's in. We're going to see all these changes, right, that are going to happen. So the benefits, what do we need to change about that? Information transfer. Hear me. This is a huge one. You have people you got to get information from right now. Right now. And so if that means having them sit on a Zoom and record themselves talking about something, now I'm not talking about any of you that work in military stuff where it's going to be extremely, extremely restricted. I'm not talking about you, but I'm talking about there are many, many people that could sit down right now and record some of their subject matter expertise and have that for the future, for people to be able to have and be able to share. It's going to be really, really important to find ways to encourage information transfer. Also, don't abandon your mentoring. Have people do Zoom mentoring sessions. Don't lose those. Build them into your days to do more mentoring sessions with your people. A last thing that I will really, really push is this. You've got to find a way to do online orientations. Right now, most people are in a hiring freeze, but you're going to see more and more and more and more and more people get at it. We're going to continue hiring. Okay. You've got to figure out how you're going to put all your information online. So making sure you know how to do Zooms online. Love Stephanie is talking about hiring and orienting digitally. Make sure you've got a plan for how that happens. Find like the software that I use is called Easy Webinar. It's a great program, great recording. Zoom's good. You can do things in podcast form. How are you going to do this? Do you need to get a website that is specifically there to hold all your orientation information? Are you going to use Canvas for modules? The more that you can understand that there is a change that is about to happen, start thinking now. Don't wait. Please don't wait. Okay. And ultimately, this is what I'll leave you with. Ultimately, the future is going to be what we make it. We don't know exactly right now where this is going to go and how this is going to end. But we know that the change has happened. It has been catalyzed. And so we have to begin looking at how can we do hybrid? How can we do online tech? I mean, do we need to start when we're released to go back? Can we have our weekly meetings at Panera Bread once a month or once a week? What can we do that's going to change the future of how work looks? So I hope that you feel like you have learned some interesting things so far today. Anthony has a great thing here. He says, don't fear the unknown, embrace it. There were people who never, ever thought they were ever going to be able to work from home. Never. And all of a sudden, they're able to. So let's begin putting on our forward-thinking caps and really looking at how this is going to change the future of work. And understanding that every single one of these generations has a different perspective, right? And that each person is going to grieve. They're going to grieve their past. They're going to grieve their past situation. Okay. So give each other grace, be kind to one another as much as possible during this time. And let's be excited about what is catalyzed. Is it crazy that this has happened? Yes. Is there a way that we can turn around and use this horrible thing to move us forward? Yes. But let's get focused on what could be and not so focused on what's happening at this point in time.